Welcome to Horror Score. We're your hosts, Jesse and
Vanessa.
And this week's episode is
The Village.
Thank you. I saw this movie in the theater with my mom. It's only like the third movie in my life that I can remember that I saw in the theater with my mom. But
Hi, Wanda.
on a whim. I think I was on summer vacation in college because this movie was 2004. Yeah. And I was like, do you want to go see a movie? And she's like, sure. What's playing? And I was like, nothing you would like except The Village. And we went and saw it. So here we are all these years later, reviewing it on Horror Score. You may have noticed that we are dressed up today for the episode in some of our Renaissance Fair gear.
We didn't get to go any Ren fairs this year because of COVID.
Thanks, COVID. All the cool stuff that we do every year was canceled. So we got to drag out our costumes for this episode for The Village. So we're probably going to just zoom into story pretty quickly. I think everything that I wanted to say is tied into all of our scoring categories. Did you?
I did not go see this with my mom when I was in college. I've actually never seen it before. And you might be thinking, wow, Vanessa, you love Adrian Brody so much and you haven't seen one of his movies. I loved it.
This is about my 6th watch, and I'm glad that you loved it. And again, this movie...
I can't believe nobody spoiled this movie for me after 16 years of it being out.
I think people have stopped talking about it, which is why it was a good time for us to, give it a review and horror score it. Though this movie's PG-13, normally I'm very apprehensive about PG-13 horror movies, but it works sometimes, and it works for this movie. Which apparently, I read this morning, this movie got an R rating on its first draft.
M. Night.
Yeah. But then M. Night intentionally, 2 movies later, went for his first real R rating on purpose with The Happening, which we are not talking about today. We're not. Maybe later. Maybe some other day. We'll talk about The Happening. But for today...
Maybe if we drive past an especially lecherous looking tree, we'll talk about that.
While the wind is blowing, yeah.
What did that shrub just say? Sorry.
It's okay. So we're going to get into story right away. So we have a colonial settlers in a Pennsylvania village out in a valley in the middle of nowhere. And they've got these rules that they live by. They can't leave the town, or else the creatures who live in the woods will get them. It's unclear exactly how they're going to get them or what they're going to do to them. They're just monsters that will, gobble you up, kidnap you, do horrible things that generic storybook monsters will do to a person when they get you.
Bake you into a pie.
Make you into a pie. Leave you on someone's doorstep. So this movie, I think does a good job establishing the people of the town. The whole cast is wonderful. There's lots of familiar faces. I'll get into an S Factor specifically. She already mentioned Adrian Brody. And Bryce Dallas Howard is in this, and she's fantastic as well.
Judy Greer. Wonderful.
Sigourney Weaver. Yeah. William Hurt is fantastic. You may recognize him.
Joaquin Phoenix.
Yep. Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix is awesome in everything that he does. So I gave the story a 14. I think that the characters are all solid, well-rounded. A lot of the dialogue. Now, some people have a problem with the dialogue in this movie because, these are old settlers in colonial times. And there's some times where some people say something and, you're like, that's weird. I think one of William Hurt's first lines, he sees children gathered around a dead animal and he's like, what manner of spectacle has captured your attention so that I may keep it in my pocket to and it was that's kind of weird. But otherwise, I think the script and the story is solid. I think it's a great movie. And this is one of the only M. Night movies where I had a guess at what the ending was. I wasn't sure of myself. But I was like, I wonder, because I was assuming there was going to be a twist, it was the only one I could come up with, and then it panned out, which we will not spoil for you here, because we are against spoilers on Horror Score. What do you want to say about the story?
I thought it was interesting. After a certain amount of time, though, so one of the rules is you don't go into the scary woods, right?
The Covington Woods.
Okay. There's a lot of teenagers in this village, a lot of kids. I don't care what century these kids grew up in, like they're teenagers, and I feel like kids would have broken that rule like long before. And I was I was watching the movie going, okay, we're an hour in, we haven't taken a step into the woods yet. Like, I want to know what's going on in there. Like, it's just really...
Well, the kids in the town, the teenagers, play that game where they stand on the stump with their back to the woods at night, and they see how long they can stand there before they lose their morale and run away. I'm just saying.
That's kid stuff. Teenage stuff is like, yeah, let's go in the woods and smoke cigarettes together.
No, they were brought up in a very, like, strict environment. Just think about
people... Oh, those are the wildest kids. Kids grew up in
and one of those kids was Jesse Eisenberg,
yeah.
which I never recognized.
So young.
Like, I've seen this movie several times, had never noticed it until this watch. That, like...
He was sitting at that table.
Jesse Eisenberg. And the guy from Cabin in the Woods... The Fool was in this. Never noticed he was a guy who didn't like getting his shirt wrinkled. And I was happy to see him in another movie. Do you want to talk about the villains?
Yeah. Well, I gave story a 12.
Just
tighten up that category.
Oh, now we'll talk about villains.
Let's
talk about the villains in the village.
I thought the costume design on the villains was so... I guess I'd never seen a creature kind of modeled that way, so I really enjoyed it, and I just kept wanting to see them on the screen. But I was a little bit disappointed, and I'm not gonna go into it.
That's fair. I felt the same way. Did you say your score?
10. I
also gave the villain a 10. I think they look wonderful. There's a lot of suspense, and when you finally start to see them, you want to see more because it's dark and they're cloaked and you see little bits. They sort of remind me of like sometimes the Skeksis from Dark Crystal, or like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles villain.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, is that Bebop?
if Bebop was a porcupine or something. I don't think you get to see them quite enough, and I think that the movie would have been awesome if it started with someone running like from the woods or the tree line, like being chased.
Now he's trying to rewrite, and
I'm not trying to rewrite. It's just that we go so long. I wish it kind of started with like just a real short 1 or 2 minute intense scene of someone narrowly escaping, even if we don't see them, just like hearing them or the noises. But again, as the movie goes on, my opinion of the villain meanders, and it ends at a 10. There's high points where I'm like, these guys are so cool.
Yeah.
But I ended at 10, and I don't want to spoil anything, so you should watch it and make your own decision about that.
What about the horror?
The horror category.
The horror.
I gave it a low score. It's a 9. However, the moments that are scary, I found that I was very legitimately scared, like edge of my seat, like, oh no, like, you know, like you see the right part of a monster, like a scary gnarled hand scratching on a door. The scary moments are scary. There's just not a lot of them. So overall, like looking at it, trying to be objective, I gave it a 9 in the horror category. And I don't think that that takes away from it being a good movie. It's just not very scary, except those couple little scary pockets, which when the movie is trying to be scary, I think it is very scary. What about you?
I gave it an 8 because it wasn't spooky.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to that?
No.
Okay.
I don't find, like, I don't know. Jump scares are cool and all. But as far as, like, the horror category goes, it's, I don't know. It feels cheap putting them in there because, I don't know. The horror points that I got, the 8 points I gave it for horror, definitely come from how convincingly creepy the villain costumes were, and that's just kind of like an extension of villain.
Well, speaking of costumes, that'll take us into effects, which is the next category. Do you want to start effects?
I do.
All right, let's do it. Start effects.
I gave effects an 11. I thought there were some really lovely violins, and obviously, as I said before, the villain costumes, but also the period costumes that the rest of the cast were wearing was great, and the set. So I griped about how long it took them to go into the woods, but with how long it probably took them to build this expansive, very realistic, very cool set, I could understand why they might have wanted to hang out there for a little while longer.
And that's something that M. Night does a lot, which I didn't realize, like Signs, which is a movie that I love, Signs. But it's just filmed in a farmhouse. But they specifically built that farmhouse exactly to accommodate the script and filming indoors. Right. So, and then they tore it down after, and they did the same thing with this town in Pennsylvania. They built it. And it was really cool because some of the buildings were like, oh, that's wardrobe. Like, rather than having trailers on a set, you just went into different places in the village, which I think is really cool. Like, that's a break room. There's donuts in that shack over there.
Yeah, there's donuts over there.
These buildings are actual sets. And I guess some of the buildings had multiple versions of the same set, so they could film, like, scenes that take place in the same building, like at the same time. Like, Unit 1, you guys are going to go film there, but we're going to film a scene that takes place later over here. So that's cool. I gave it a 15. Just so much went into this movie that you don't notice. And you mentioned the music. I absolutely agree. James Newton Howard is one of my favorite music composers, and he does the music for almost all of M. Night's movies, or at least his first run of films. He did like Unbreakable and Signs, which I listen to the soundtrack to all the time. Lady in the Water, which some people hate that movie. I appreciate it, and I think that the soundtrack is amazing.
I only hate the soundtrack because it's his alarm music in the morning.
One of my alarms. I have several alarms set for different things, and I don't know which one's which. I'm just like, I got to get up at 8 tomorrow, setting it for 8, and sometimes it's that one. It's a nice song to wake up to. James Newton Howard, your work is fantastic.
I'm sorry that he ruined it by associating it with the time you have to get out of bed.
That takes us into our final category, S Factor, where we can award bonus points between 0 and 20 for whatever reasons we see fit. I chose to give this movie 10 additional points just for having an amazing, well-rounded cast. Like, every character, most characters, I recognized from some other M. Night movie. He likes to work with a lot of the same people. Like Joaquin Phoenix was also in Signs, and Bryce Dallas Howard was also in Lady in the Water. Just to see all of these actors together, working together, even if the script was worse or wasn't as good, or the movie had other problems, just having them on screen.
I didn't have a problem with the script.
Me either.
This is the first
I'm
time
saying
hearing
if it was
about
worse.
Like the language. Like, what did you expect?
No, I like this movie. I recommend this movie all the time, and that's why I've seen it at least 6 or 7 times. So what'd you give it for S Factor?
I gave it 10 points because if you put Adrian Brody in any movie ever, I'm a little bit of a fan. He acted the hell out of this role.
Yeah.
He played someone with special needs, and it was very, very, very convincing.
Yeah. Have you seen The Jacket?
No.
That is another Adrian Brody movie that's sort of a horror that I think you would like. And maybe you comment below, what is the best Adrian Brody movie in your opinion?
It's The Pianist.
Maybe. We'll find out. When we post this, I will start by commenting on my favorite Adrian Brody movie, and you can do the same, and then maybe people will
It's The Pianist. We'll
pick that up from there. So before we total these up, we're going to head to Vanessa's one-sentence synopsis.
A community's only blind resident is the only person brave enough to venture into the spooky woods to get help.
So that brings us to totals. My grand total is 58 horror score points for 2004's The Village. What you got?
And Adrian Brody gets 51 horror score points from me. I'm just kidding. It was a great film, and I would totally watch it again and recommend it to other people, which makes a grand total average between us of 54.5 horror score points.
That's 50 something reasons to check this movie out. Just a couple last minute things. If you want to contact us, if you want to recommend that we do a certain movie, if you're a filmmaker and you've just released a movie, like a small limited release, and you want to help get the word out that, hey, this movie is out there, and you want to get us a copy to watch and review, you can reach us at horrorscorereview@gmail.com.
Or if you're really cool and living in 2020, you can contact our Twitter account, which is @scorehorror.
Either one of those ways, we would love to hear from you. And before we go, I'd just like to give another shout out and recommend to our viewers that there is a podcast out there called Make Me Shudder. Jay and Shane work together reviewing every movie alphabetically on Shudder. And they're somewhere around episode 9 or 10 right now, and by the time this airs, they're probably going to be on episode 40. So we recommend that you definitely should check that out. That's all we have for you tonight. We will see you next time at the Horror Score Studio.
Stay spooky.